Today we'll be creating this cute alien sculpture. It's made with polymer clay and we'll be exploring how to create a good sculpture base and how to fashion a sturdy armature. So let's get into it. For the base and armature we'll be using a 20cm round canvas, some plaster of Paris, a bowl to mix our plaster, a plastic glove, a couple of wire coat hangers, some thin tie wire, some aluminium foil and some clear tape. For tools, we'll be using some snub nose pliers. We also used a plate to hold our clay and also using a banding wheel and some dividers, but these two are optional. For the modelling, we'll be using some black, white, emerald green and salmon polymer clay, and these are in the 60-gram blocks. For modelling tools, we only used a pin tool, a hobby knife and the end of a small paintbrush. This is an excellent, inexpensive tool for smoothing out polymer clay. To paint the base, we'll be using lamp black acrylic colour and phthalo blue metallic acrylic. We have supplied this modelling guide and armature plan that can be found on our website. Cut out the footprint and lay it over the round canvas and punch 2 holes through the canvas. Next, take a wire coat hanger and bend it straight like this. Use that footprint guide again and create 2 90-degree bends into a square U shape. Place this through the canvas and then lay the canvas face side down and place the canvas on some glasses. If you want a secure footing, make sure the wire sits in the middle of the plaster when we pour it. We can then mix our plaster. A good ratio to mix plaster is 1 part water to 2 parts plaster. In this case, we have used 250 millilitres of water. Always use a glove when mixing plaster and never leave your hand in the plaster once it starts to set. Carefully pour the plaster into the back of the canvas. Give it some gentle taps to release any air bubbles and leave it for an hour. Ideally, overnight in a ventilated area will give the best results. A good armature is imperative for figurative sculpture. It can be thought of like a skeleton. To fashion the armature, refer to the plan and bend the leg back at an angle, then create a bend at the hip. Then a bend to take it up to the head area. Create the other leg armature next. This has a bend at the knee. Create a bend at the hip and then take it up to the next wire. This is the spine of our friend. Put a slight bend on the spine so that it has a lean forward. Use those snub nose pliers to clamp the wires near the hip and twist them together. We can then measure against the plans and cut the wires to size. Measure the point where the arms are on the spine and twist the length of wire tightly around the spine. Bend it to shape and cut it to size and then create the other arm and cut that to size. Ensure the shoulders bend back slightly. Next we wrap some thin tie wire around each leg and arm. We also create a looper of wire on the leading foot to provide a support for the clay when we make our boot. This tie wire will create more surface area for the clay to adhere to, and if any of the armature is wobbly, tie wire can firm it up. The head on our alien is oversized, and so the sculpture is not too top heavy and the clay bakes evenly, we can bulk it out with aluminium foil. To do this, we create a ball of aluminium foil and knock it into shape so that it is firm and compressed. Refer to the plan and knock it into the approximate shape. The shape is sort of a kidney bean shape but pointy at the chin. Ensure that this shape sits inside the perimeter of the finished size, ideally so we can add the clay to a thickness of about 6 mm around it. Once the head is finished, press it down onto the spine. Next we can bulk out the body with more aluminium foil. We do this by pulling out a length of foil and folding it to a thickness of about 3 cm and wrap it around the belly. Once the desired thickness has been reached, cut the foil and tightly bind it with clear tape. While you're here, take a look around the Create section on our site and uncover a whole heap of free stuff. From free projects, handy tips and tricks, and techniques to keep you busy. Our armature is finished and we can now add the clay. Open a pack of black clay and knead it until it is soft. This is called conditioning. Press it onto the bottom of each of the legs. Use the hobby knife and carve the shape of each boot. The front of the boot on the leading foot is angled up and the rear foot bends at the toes. To smooth the clay, we use the end of a paintbrush to gently roll it flat. Next we open a pack of salmon clay. Condition it and pack it around each leg up to the hips. Ensure there is no air between the armature and the clay. We can then slowly carve away the clay until the legs are of the correct thickness. The arms can be handled in the same way. If you take too much clay off, you expose the armature, but you can easily apply more clay over that area and carve it back. After the legs and arms are modelled, we can pack clay onto the belly and the back. Press it tightly onto the clay and then carve it back. Refer to the plans to ensure the shape is correct, then blend this into the arms and legs with that handy paintbrush handle again. The head is created by covering the aluminium foil head shape with a layer of emerald green clay, approximately 6 mm thick. It is easier to remove the head from the armature to do this. Smooth it off and flatten out some black clay. Cut 2 elliptical eye shapes using the plan as a template and carefully apply them in the correct position. To suggest the brow ridge above each eye, I create 2 crescent shapes. Place them above each eye and blend them onto the head. The trailing hand can easily be created by flattening out a ball of clay into an oblong shape, cutting 3 fingers into it and pressing it onto the end of the arm wire of the armature. To create our little friend's ray gun, we first have to mix up a grey from black and white clay. Knead it until it is thoroughly blended. Flatten it out on the plate and cut the handle and trigger assembly, and cut a hole for the finger. The hand can be created in the same way as the other, and the finger can be placed around the trigger and the handle. The top of the gun can be fashioned with a tube that tapers off out at the end, and this can be joined and blended onto the trigger assembly. To add some interest, I then add a ring of salmon clay around the gun. The hand and trigger can then be pressed onto the arm. Our little alien friend has embellishments on his spacesuit. To create these, we need to mix up a pink from white and salmon clay. Create a thin tube and wrap it around the legs, above the boots and on the wrists. Smooth the joins with the brush handle. Create some larger crescent shapes and place these around each shoulder. Then add another teardrop shape through the spine onto the body. Place a thin tube of emerald green around the neck, carve it to the right thickness, then feed the head onto the spine and blend the neck out onto the head. A belt can be made from a thin tube, flattened out and wrapped around his body and smoothed at the back. A round buckle can be created by pressing a salmon-coloured ball of clay into the middle of the belt. A smaller pink ball is then pressed onto the body above the belt, and a tiny ball of salmon clay is pressed onto each side of the gun. Our little alien friend is now ready for baking, and he can be baked at 1 hour at 130 degrees Celsius, and that's 266 degrees Fahrenheit. The final step is to colour the base. We have tried to emulate how the floor on a spaceship might look. So we first paint the base in with black acrylic paint and then scumble metallic over the top, and voila! Well, we really hope you enjoyed this project. We've had a lot of fun creating this sculpture. Otherwise, have fun creating, and we'll see you in the next one.